Welcome to another episode of Inspire People, Impact Lives. I'm your host, Josh Kosnick. And by trade, I'm a financial advisor, and by training, now a leader at Northwestern Mutual, managing partner. So today, really excited to introduce our special guest, Joe Boucher. Joe is co-founder of Nieder & Boucher, teaches at the UW-Madison Business School, which I find interesting that it's not the law school, it's the business school.
Right.
So we'll talk a little bit about that. Authored several books and articles on LLCs, and a bunch of stuff that I don't even know about. But Chad put in notes, but I can't even pronounce it. But currently included in the Wisconsin Super Lawyers list and the best lawyers in America. Named the best lawyers 2017 and 2019 closely held companies and family business lawyer of the year from Madison. So highly esteemed lawyer here in Madison. And, I've gotten to know Joe and his family over the years. His son played with my little brother, on which our audience has heard Jordan a couple of times. So know the family well and know that he's done great work here in Madison. So without further ado, Joe, glad to have you here.
Oh, it's my pleasure. You know, when I've seen some of these online, and I thought, then there was something about, if you're interested, I said, what the heck? And of course, I knew your family, knew your younger brother a little bit better because he was in class with my son, Willie. So I thought that'd be great. So yes, thank you very much.
You bet. So let's have a good conversation today.
Right.
And Joe introduced this topic to Chad and I with legacy, and it's one of my favorite topics, so I'm excited to dive in. But before we do that, why don't you tell the audience, besides what I said about your bio, tell the audience a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, well, thanks. So, the beauty of the world we live in, now there's LinkedIn, right? And so for people who really want to see all the P's and Q's of the detail of my professional bio, you can see it there. You mentioned some of the things. I've been a lawyer now for 42 years. I have an MBA, I'm a CPA, and all those things are on LinkedIn. But what honestly I'm proudest of is that I'm a family guy. I'm a granddad now of 5 children, 5 grandkids. I'm a father of 3. I have an unbelievable spouse who's also a lawyer, estate planning lawyer. As you may know, and your brother knows, she played the piano at Edgewood for years and years for the everything there. And so we are very active. I'm proudest of being a family person, to be honest, a husband, a dad, a friend. That's what I'm proudest of. And that texture doesn't show up on LinkedIn, right?
Yeah, right.
What shows up on LinkedIn is important stuff. Don't get me wrong. I'm proud of those things. But I'm proudest of being a good person and being a family guy and those types of things. That's what I'm proudest of.
Well, and those are the things that are, at the end of the day, when we're talking about legacy, those are the people that are going to be in the room with you anyhow.
Right.
Not possibly some colleagues, but certainly probably not clients in the periphery of
Right.
The LinkedIn world. So
Right.
that's the right focus anyhow. So you've been playing a huge role working throughout Madison with businesses in the startup community, in bigger businesses than the startup community, teaching, coaching, mentoring. So all of that, what I was thinking about is, what did the word legacy mean to you early on in your career versus what it means to you today?
Yeah, but I'll answer that question. I thought a bit about this, but I also wanted to go backwards just a step and say, I think I look at my life now like an evolving situation, right? I'm 67 years old. I'm a lot different than I was 2 years ago. I think I'm different than I'll be 2 months from now. And so, and we're born, we get these genes, right, from our parents. And I was blessed. I had two wonderful parents. And you get this genetic package, and then you grow up in a family, right? And I'm the oldest of 5 kids. And one of the first major events in my life was my brother, who's 3 years younger, is developmentally disabled, my brother Paul. And I think Jordan probably met him, your brother met him, because we brought him to all these Edgewood events. Chad, you may have met him. But that's I'm 3, right? And I have a brother who's got a developmental disability, and you don't know. You're 3 years old. You don't know what's wrong, but you know something's wrong, right?
Just know he's different.
He's different. And in between us is another brother. So there's 3 boys. We're Irish triplets, right? 3 boys in like 3 years. And so all of a sudden, my mom has to spend all her time with Paul. I'm a self-starter anyway, but I'm 3. My dad's gone all the time because he's working at our family business. So early on, you're kind of fending for yourself. And I'm a boomer, right? I grew up in the 50s. There were kids everywhere. So you're hanging out with your buddies. So you're building this kind of culture, and you're affected by this brother, and frankly, tremendously so. So, for example, you start evaluating what your strengths and weaknesses are. I just trust everybody. And and Paul is that kind of guy. Paul just trusts everybody. Now, once in a while, here and there, I get burned by that, right? But for the most part, trusting everybody has been a really important characteristic. Not everybody's that way. The brother between us, my brother Patrick, doesn't trust everybody. He's kind of he's more of a skeptic.
Yeah.
But I was born with this trust gene, right? I trust. And so you start learning your characteristics. You start learning your strengths and weaknesses. You start learning how to make judgments. I was listening to an NPR piece the other day talking about how people redirect people online because they're about to commit suicide, and they Google something and they try to send them to a suicide prevention thing.
Yeah.
We're all kind of impulsive. I'm kind of an impulsive, excitable guy. You can see that in my voice here. So the question is, do you make good judgments all the time with that impulse? And you have to learn over time how to make judgments. So when you hear the word legacy as a lawyer, I'm a lawyer after all, trained as a lawyer, means what do you give the next generation, right? It's almost a property, right? It's a property kind of thing. But I hope I don't look at it that way. I look at it as a feeling kind of thing. What do I leave to people in terms of impressions? And I hope they're positive, right? I hope they're motivational. I hope I give more than I take, right? Kind of thing. So even as a kid, I realized, geez, I have a chance to make a difference. Now, I also learned I wasn't the smartest kid in my grade school class, and I went to this small Catholic grade school. I wasn't the best athlete in my grade school class. So I also learned early I had to be on a team, right? I wanted to be on a strong team, and I wanted to be on a winning team. And I realized I could contribute to that team, but I probably wasn't going to be the smartest person necessarily, and I wasn't going to be the best athlete necessarily. So I said, geez, this is a good thing. So even when I was a kid, and then, you're impacted by major events in your life. My dad died when I was a high school kid. And my dad owning this bakery, you're in the advice business, right? Yeah. We're in the advice business, those of us sitting here, right? Yeah. How do you measure what's the value of advice when you give it away? It's hard to measure, right? It's easy to measure the value of a donut. So my dad gave donuts away. When my dad's funeral came around, it was just packed in Marinette, this small town. Why? Because he had been so generous to people. But it was obvious generosity, right? It was my message. It was obvious generosity. So I grew up in this.
They're tangible gifts.
It was tangible, yes. Yeah. And I grew up in this family that was just generous. My mother, she was taking care of Paul, and Paul was a challenge. And so I was aware early on that this was meaningful. To be able to reach out to people and help. So, but then my dad dies, and I get to college, and I need a mentor. So that's a current word for it, right? But I found an English teacher at St. Norbert College. Ken Zahorsky is his name. He's still living. He was a young professor there. He taught English, and I was in math, and science and stuff. But he was fantastic. So I took every class he taught. But I go to his room, his office, and I needed help, right? I'm a young guy. I could go the wrong direction easily,
You lost your
I lost my
mentor,
dad. So I went to Ken. And I looked for him, and he was really helpful to me. Now, you have friends, right? And my friends were a big part of my life. But friends are doing impulsive, stupid things too at age 20, right? We all are. And I needed somebody older than me saying, shake me up. Not a good idea. So then I get to Madison. Same thing happened. I wrote a letter to everybody in Madison. At the point I came here, and when I was 22, I thought I wanted to be a college athletic director or a pro sports guy because I played college football. That's what I thought I wanted to be. So I went to MBA school, right? I wrote everybody in the Madison area a letter saying, I want to coach, I want to do this and that. The only guy to return my message, Joel Maturi of Edgewood High School. So in the fall of 74, I coached at Edgewood. Now, I had gone to a Catholic grade school in high school and college, to be honest. So it was natural to be interested in Edgewood. But Joel was the only guy to respond. So I met Joel Maturi. Now, you know Joel now. Joel's a respected former athletic director. I met him when he was, 28? And I'm 22. And I started coaching at Edgewood, and it was meaningful. But they were mentors to me, right? And I met a whole bunch of young people, typically young guys, who were motivated like me, and I met them there, and I got to coach, and I met all these. And so then I realized, I don't think this is what I want to do. So I switched to law school, met my wife the first day in law school. But at each one of these steps, so my dad's death had a major impact on my life. My brother's birth had a major impact on my life. So when you talk legacy, I don't know if I ever thought of it that way. It's just kind of, you're evolving as a person, right? Yeah. You're evolving as a person, but you're realizing you're having an impact on people. I was the high school class president. I was the captain of the football and basketball team. So obviously some people thought I was, some leadership there. But I didn't think of it as a legacy thing. I thought of it as I'm having an impact. I can help. I can do positive things, and so it just kind of evolved, over time. It evolved over time.
So that's an awesome backdrop. So now how do you think about legacy? Now that you have all these points of reflection, all these impacts that have had on you and you've had on others, what does legacy mean to you today?
Yeah, so let me just, again, answer it by going back just a little bit. So I also realize you're a young parent. I realize, I don't know what Chad's status is, but you're a young parent, and I have 2 children with kids, 5 grandkids. And I said, I have to figure out how I'm going to make an impact on my children. And it's not just going to be, do I make sure they get a great education? Do I not? All these other things. But do we do meaningful things together that they can remember us by? Experiences. So I've always believed in experiences. It just didn't happen to me in the last couple of years, which is the current trend. So we started early on doing things with the kids. National parks. We started going to national parks when they were little. Every summer we took 2 weeks going to national parks. The oldest daughter, Ellie, who's in D.C. now, a lawyer in D.C., loves music like my wife does. So was musical theater and was plays. So we've picked out things for each of the kids that really were meaningful for them and made sure we did those things with them. So, in terms of legacy, it's again evolved, but I tried to have a meaningful impact. So did Susan on our children. Susan played the piano for years at Edgewood. She wanted to do that. I coached sports for a reason. I wanted to be with my children. I wanted to have a meaning. But see, that was spurred by a death. You talk about impacts. So in the mid-'80s, I was now a young lawyer, had a very successful practice. I was traveling all over the country, buying and selling companies and doing, it was fun stuff. And at this point, we had 2 children, a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. I got to the airport in Madison in the summer of '86, about this time. I get to the airport. Susan picks me up with the 2 girls and our friend Jenna, and they just look like death warmed over, because it was. Our nanny at our home that day died.
At your home?
At our home. She died at our home when our 1-year-old was there. Our 3-year-old was with this other young lady. And I got home and I realized I can't do this anymore. I can't travel. I've got to be home. That was a huge event in my life. It changed my focus for the next 20 years. I said, I'm too important to the family. It's too important to me. I can't leave. So my business had to take second place. And it always did, but it really did when that happened.
Yeah.
I stopped leaving from business. I just stayed home. I tried to build a practice, and frankly, it hurt income. But I didn't care. Income is secondary. Family's first. So for the next 15 or 20 years, I coached sports. I did all this stuff. So did Susan. We built a law firm, and it did fine, but it wasn't. But then once Willie went to college in 2006, it said, geez, I can start doing this again. And so it started really, kind of turbocharging the practice a little bit. But for those 20 years, it was family first. Mm-hmm. It was family first. Now, when the kids are gone, when your kids live at home, you have minutes with them. You have minutes with your kids now, right? Yeah. Hour here. Now I have days, because none of them live here. So I'm leaving today for DC. I have days with my kids and grandkids, not minutes. So from 2006 on, I started figuring out, how can I have an impact on my career, and I'm going to spend days with my children. So we go for days to see the kids.
Yeah, you said you're going out there for a couple of weeks.
Yeah, well, we're going up there for 5 days, but I took the grandkids for 10 days in May while our daughter went to France. So I take 2-3 months off a year now to be with kids and travel. But you got to figure out how to work that in, right? Yeah. And build a career. But family had always to be number one. So in answer to your question, you create a legacy by giving. See if you're a giver. I want to be with people who are givers. You guys are givers. You're doing this. Sure, it helps your business, but you're a giver, right?
Trying to give back.
If we give back, and so early on, I realized, again, back to my brother Paul. My brother Paul's got a disability. I don't. I'm in a better place, so I've got to take advantage of that. So, for example, a week from tomorrow, Friday, I'm taking him on a 5-day trip. Every year, I take him on a trip, and I see him multiple times a year. This year, we're taking a driving trip. I've taken him to L.A., San Francisco, Pittsburgh, all over the country. I've taken him on trips, he and I.
What do you guys like to do?
Well, he loves trains.
Does he?
And he loves music. So I've taken him to Nashville a couple times. I've taken him on train rides all over the country. This one won't be in train. As he gets older, he's less mobile, so he can't quite get around as well. So it's a driving trip this time, but he loves music. He loves seeing stuff. He lives in a group home in Marinette. He just likes getting away. But here's the impact my brother's had. 2 years ago this summer. So let me set a picture for you. Main Street, USA, Marinette, Wisconsin. Our house is 1386 Main Street. 2 blocks down the river is Goodwill Industries, where my brother Paul used to work for 44 years, okay? Next door to Goodwill is the fire department. Paul spent 38 years of his life going to the fire department 2 out of 3 days because those firefighters loved him, and vice versa, right? They just loved him. I mean, Paul's like me, out there, full of stories, fun guy to be with, but he's got a disability, right? Couldn't happen in Madison or other big cities, right? They wouldn't let a person in the fire department who doesn't work there, right? So 2 years ago, about this time of the year, they had the 150th anniversary of the Marinette Fire Department. And they sent us an email saying, we're going to honor Paul, a special surprise honor for Paul.
That's
Can you
so
come?
cool.
So we drive up to Marinette. The whole family goes up there, and at 3 o'clock on the dime, they have a ceremony. Paul is our favorite non-firefighter. And they give him a helmet. They give him a shirt. They have a ceremonial fire pole in a room where they all sign a wall saying the retirees. He signed that. And then they gave him a ride home in the fire truck. This is Paul.
How big was the smile on his face?
Oh, he was in tears like I am. It was unbelievable. So we went to see him the 4th of July, had a little time. We drove up to Marinette for the 4th of July, spent some time up there, took him to the fire department. And these guys, young guys like you guys, I mean, young men now, young fire, just love him. So that kind of thing. Again, trust. He trusts everybody. See, he trusts everybody. So it's such a positive thing, right? So again, with Paul, he and I do stuff together, right? You got to give back. So legacy is what you make of it. So you asked about books. When the book 7 Habits of Highly Effective People came out in '89. I checked it last night because that's like one of my Bibles, right?
Yep.
So I read that book and said, this crystallizes a lot of what my thinking has been. But I didn't realize it until I actually read it. Begin with the end in mind, right?
Yep.
When I read that book, I said, man, this is sharpen the saw, all those phrases which I kind of buy into. But I had been living a lot of those things. And then a book came out when I was like 37, 38 years old. I said, man, this really makes sense to me.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, and we've talked about that book a lot on this podcast.
Right.
In fact, Joe Sweeney and I talked about that
yeah.
book on this podcast because it's just, you read any business list, any business leader, they give their top 10 books. That's always in there.
Oh, it's just fantastic. And I read that, and I always kept that card in my wallet to refresh my memory on what those habits are, because I want to be reminded about what I should be and how I should, do things.
Yeah, my first daily planner was a Franklin Covey planner. And still had those great quotes. And now, obviously, the son of Stephen Covey wrote the 7 Habits. Yeah. But either way, the principles from the father and the son are fantastic.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So are all your kids lawyers?
No, 2 of the 3.
2 of the 3.
So
I was
the
like,
oldest,
I knew Willie.
So the oldest, Ellie, is an environmental lawyer in D.C. Husband has a master's at. Example. I meet the son-in-law comes to me, future son-in-law, and says, "I want to marry your daughter." I won't tell you everything I said to him. One of them I said, "You have a lousy education. You have a lousy education. You got to get it, Stephen. You're a wonderful guy. I'm glad you want to marry my daughter. You got to get a better education." So he worked while Ellie went to law school in Portland, Oregon. Ellie wanted to be an environmental lawyer, so she went to one of the best in Lewis and Clark. And then they moved to D.C., and he went to American University, got a master's in business in arts administration, and now is a really prominent marketing job at the Kennedy Center. So we go frequently to New York, and to D.C., and we have tickets to the Broadway plays at the Kennedy Center. So we're going Saturday night, take them out to dinner and go there. So we go frequently there. So Ellie's a lawyer there with 2 kids, 2 little girls. My middle daughter has a master's in social work in Milwaukee. She's got 3 kids, like you, 6. Well, you have 4, 6, 4, and 2. Her husband, 28 years of education, 34 years old. He's now got his first real job. He's an echocardiologist in Milwaukee, physician, Dan Harland. And Willie, who knows obviously Jordan. Willie is leaving for Tommy Lindholm, by the way. It's a bachelor party today in Maine. Willie's a CPA lawyer like me with a firm in Milwaukee, married and doing great. Yeah. I think I shouldn't probably say this publicly. I think he's maybe on the verge of maybe having kids, but we'll see, right? Yeah. We'll see. Who knows?
Yeah, that's up to him.
Who knows?
We'll see.
Who knows? Yeah.
So that obviously education's played a super important role in your life, and you're really keen on what, like that comment to your future son-in-law,
right?
Like that's really that stuck out to me because my father-in-law never said it to me, but he ran a very successful business, and he never went to school, and I was a college dropout, and have gotten to this point in my career. Why is education so important to you?
Sure. Well, let me just say this to you: education isn't just degrees.
Correct.
I want to be clear.
Yep.
I want to be clear here.
Good.
So, my dad had an 8th grade education, okay? My mother had a high school education, and she said education's critical. But I learned from both my mother and my father. My mother was more of a book learning person. My mom didn't get married till she was 30, and she was an insurance exec at a small insurance agency. My mom was a professional in the 40s, okay? And my dad had an 8th grade education, started his own business. So I learned practical and books, right? I learned both. So my dad, too many people go to college. You got to be a tradesperson. He was a baker, all this. He was smart enough, but 8th grade education.
Yeah.
Turns out my wife's family was the same way. Dad, 8th grade education, 5 years in the World War II, just like my dad. Started a construction business. So I've always believed that education is 2 pieces: books and day-to-day effort. Okay.
Yeah.
And so, I believe education matters. I hope every day I learn something. To show you different trust versus cynicism, I had a law school roommate, great guy, great high school basketball player, played against him in high school, met him in college. He went to De Pere Penning's, the old Catholic boys' school in De Pere. I'd say, Jimmy, every day I learn so much. He'd say to me, but Joe, I forget more than I learn every day. I said, Jimmy, you're 22. You can't be forgetting more than you're learning.
Yeah.
So, but seriously, I think education is a big deal. And so I said that to Stephen. I said, you got to get a quality education. You've got all the other components, but you need a quality education.
Where was he in the education scale at that point?
He went to a Bible kind of school. And I thought, it's more religiously based, and I didn't think the chops were enough. I didn't think it had the chops.
Yeah.
Okay, the educational chops he needed.
Well, he took the challenge. Obviously, he wanted to marry your daughter. So.
Yeah. Well, I said, these are you're joining. So get this. About 3 years later, my daughter graduates from law school in Oregon, and this is so. His parents came to the graduation weekend. So Wade, his dad, says to me, "Can you believe my son? He's worked so hard when he's here, and now he's going to go to graduate school." And I said, "Wade, did he tell you I had a little talk with him?" He says, "What do you mean?" I said, "I told him what I told him. All 4 things I told him. I only told you one." By the way, another one was Ellie rows the boat too fast. And you know what happens when you row the boat at different speeds? It goes in circles. So I said, you know what? You Stephen, you got to pick up the pace of your rowing. You got to slow her down. If you slow her down a little bit and you speed up, that boat's going to go great guns in the right direction.
Yeah.
But if you don't row faster, buddy, this boat's going to go in circles.
Well, and you knew your daughter.
Yeah, I knew my daughter. Yeah. So guess what? Wade says to me, "You told those things to my son?" Said Wade, he was joining the Boucher team. He needed to know there were some rules here. That there were some rules here. There's some goals here. So yeah.
What did Wade object?
He said, "Wow, it seems to be working."
That's good.
Seems to be working. He's going to get this master's degree, and Ellie, Ellie's got this great job, and so yeah, I think he got it.
So we know that a lot of you've talked about experiences, you've talked about some of the people in your life that have played a role in you. We also know that there's some successes that leave a legacy. Right. How do you think about success?
Yeah, so I think I really thought about this a lot because I've been in 2 different worlds: the bakery world, the food world. I started Cleary's Frozen Custard in Madison. The food world. I was a baker's son, and I worked at the bakery, and I'm a lawyer. The beauty of being a baker is when you start at 9 or 10 o'clock at night, you put flour and water together and get a loaf of bread. It's quick and great. That's a success, right? You made some food that's tasty. As a lawyer, as you guys know, as financial people, it takes sometimes years to get people. You're educating people to better their lives financially, right? That's what you're doing.
Yeah.
And you guys are doing a great job of it. Northwestern is just a fantastic place. You guys are doing a great job. I'm trying to do that through the legal venue, right? Through the legal aspect, right? Trying to get people to improve their lives by being smart about the law and how they use it, right? That takes a long time. Mm-hmm. So I've had to learn lots of patience. So success, how do you measure success? To me, it's, do I make a meaningful difference in somebody's life? Do I make a meaningful difference in my own life? First of all, my own life, my kid's life, my wife's life, you go from internal to out, right?
Yeah. I love that you said that because we've talked about that frequently. And I had a conversation with a new recruit about this where she actually admitted to putting everyone else first. She was single mom, stuff of that nature. And I'm sitting there going, have you ever wondered why on an airplane, every time we sit down, they tell us to put our oxygen mask on first before assisting others? And she goes, no. I was like, well, you've heard him say that, right? And she goes, yeah. I was like, because you can't help anyone if you're dead.
So you're right about that, and it sounds selfish, doesn't it? So, I've always believed, and this is going to sound selfish, but I've said it to my wife, I said it to my kids, I said it to everybody. If you can't take care of yourself, you can't take care of anybody else.
Correct. And you're right. And the first thought is it does sound selfish. And it may even feel selfish.
Yes.
And the point is to not take it to such an extreme where you're neglecting others,
right.
But you have to be healthy yourself, mentally, physically, emotionally.
Financially, mentally, everything.
Yeah.
You have to, if you don't have the financial strength, the emotional strength, the physical strength to do things, you can't help anybody else. So you got to take care of yourself. When I've had crises in my life, and I probably had 2 or 3 of those that were really got at the core of, am I doing the right thing? And have I screwed up? I said, I have to take care of myself. I got to get through this. And my wife was, the first one that happened was a financial issue, a business I owned that cratered after the custard business. And it didn't ruin our life by any means, but it was a struggle, right? Yeah. And it wasn't a law business, thank God. It was a other business. But I questioned my whether I could do things right.
Yeah.
And I started disbelieving in myself. And she said, hang in there, and all that. So you're right. You got to take care of yourself first.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
So I love the definition of success and making a meaningful impact on others.
Right.
I think that's incredibly. Have you ever heard of the exercise? Because I had this in a leadership class.
Mm-hmm.
Have you heard of the exercise to write your own eulogy?
Yeah, I have. And I it's interesting because my dad died at 59 and I'm now 67. And I've honestly here and once in a while said, I don't want to die suddenly and not have, by the way, I think I go to doctor physical every year. I think I'm pretty good health. But I don't want that to happen. I really would like to have something ready. But you kind of keep going on in the back of your head. It's kind of one of I tell my students when I meet with them, I say, you know what? I'm not going to tell you not to have your computer in class. I'm not going to tell you to have your phone in class. You know why? Because even when I was your age, I had 8 or 9 things going on in my head at one time, right? Yeah. In my day, it was an 8-track tape player, right? And so I get it. So this is one of those tracks in my head that goes back there. I'm thinking, should I do this? Should I do this? Yes, I've heard of it.
Yeah. Well, it's an interesting thing not to write my own for someone else to read. It was given to me as a task to do to find my deeper purpose and what people want to, what I would want others to say about me if the end was
like Covey.
Today.
That's what Covey says. What are people saying at your funeral? They're not saying he should have worked more.
Yeah.
Right?
Right. They were saying probably what they said about your dad and how much of a giver he was.
Yeah, he gave a lot to me. But see, here's how life evolves. I want to be honest with you. So I can say it evolves, not honest, or unpeel more of the onion. So, I have my dad was married before World War II. I have 2 half sisters. I didn't know that. I was told that these were, Nola and Jane were, I was lied to as a kid, right? And then my dad dies, and I said, Mom, tell me the truth about Nola and Jane. Well, they're your half sisters. Your dad was married before. So my mom tells me that, and that was a relief to know, and this and that. So now, but my mother never filled the whole story up. So we went to Hawaii, where Nola lives, on a long trip, and I spent a day with her, and she revealed this to me. She said, your mother was an unbelievable woman. I said, well, I kind of knew that. Well, it was even more than you thought. I said, what do you mean? She didn't marry our father for 5 years after they met because he was a deadbeat dad. And she wouldn't marry him until he made up his past child support. So you see, my dad was generous when I knew him, but maybe not so much before that, see? And my mom apparently had a meaningful impact on him, see? Which was totally, my mom was a strong woman, right? She raised us, she ran a business, but my mom was an Irish Catholic beer drinker. My mom would be today called a functioning alcoholic. She never missed a beat. This is my mom. But you know what, one of my regrets, if I have 3 or 4 in my life, one is I didn't appreciate, you know how this goes, I didn't appreciate my parents as much as I should have.
Yeah.
My dad died at 18, I was angry at him. Why did you die, Dad? In the last 6 or 7 years, he was laid up. He had heart problems. Why is it? I was mad at him, right?
Yeah.
And then my mom, I'm struggling with my mom because she wants me to take leadership in the family because I'm a go-getter. And Joe, would you help me run the business?
And you were the oldest.
Yeah. Would you talk to your brother Patrick? My brother Patrick had issues. And would you help Patrick out? And I said, Mom, I got it, and so I'm kind of struggling with her. And then I realized, what am I doing? Mom is terrific, right? But it took me till my mid-20s to realize how wonderful my mother was. And I didn't even know until after she died. even how really wonderful she was. So see, we evolve, right?
Yeah.
That's my message. And I one of my messages. And so I hope I'm a different person 2-3 years from now than I am today, or 2-3 days from now.
Yeah, my dad and through his business coach, who's also my business coach, who just a tremendous person. This was like a nursery rhyme to me. Yeah. You're either green and growing or ripe and rotting. Jordan and I and our other siblings heard this our entire life, and so that's a theme that I go. And so you're right. Continue to grow, continue to sharpen the saw. Just
continue to evolve, right? Yeah. Continue to evolve. Right?
So going back to your 18 to 25, as you just said there, what advice would you give someone that's been through tragedy to potential? Because you went through a long stage of grief, right? Oh, yeah. So there's many stages of grief, right. but you seem to, based on what you just said there, be stuck in anger for a long duration of time. Knowing what you know now, what advice would you give to someone that's living through or about to live through a tragedy like that?
Well, one thing I tell them is to seek help from others, friends, colleagues. So again, I mentioned earlier, I'm good friends with Mark Burish. Mark's dad, Ben, was like a second father to me. Mark was one of my close friends in high school, and we were law school roommates, and we stood up in each other's weddings. And Mark's dad helped me. So, I probably overstating my anger, but I don't think I was as composed as I didn't lose my temper or anything. But I'm just saying, you reach out to others is my message. Yeah. Talk to others, and usually people older than you with more perspective than you have, right? Because your colleagues, I'll tell you what it made me do. I was a young guy. I'd like to have a good time, but I couldn't. I had to get up every morning to work. I had no money. I had to pay for everything. I couldn't just blow off I couldn't blow any time off. Yeah. So I learned one of my strengths was I had a high energy level. I could keep going and going. So even if I screwed around the night before, I was still up the next day. Yeah. I worked at a bakery. Those are long hours, hard hours. You got to work,
Yeah, well, I just wanted you to say that, or at least give some advice there, because I feel we're getting more and more awareness on it, but especially your generation was told to suck it up and rub some dirt on it and just man up.
That isn't true. You need help. We need to talk to people. I didn't do any of those things. I put on a tough face, but I told you at a college, when I got to Madison, I sought people out too. I met Joel Maturi. I met people like that. Then I got in professional areas. I found older men that I respected. I went to all the time. It was cheaper than a psychiatrist, right? Yeah. And they got to know me better, right? And so I can name names of people I don't want to do so, who are 10, 15 years older than me, who helped me for years and years and years. Yeah. They were coaches. Now you talk about, they were kind of my mentors.
Coaches, mentors.
Yeah, absolutely.
Father figures, whatever.
I sought those people out big time. Yeah. And I relied on them. I called them. I said, I got a problem. Can I come over? Go over and sit in their living room and say, can you help me with this? Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Ask.
So you want to put on a tough face, but behind that, you're working on it, right? You're working on it.
So let's shift gears a little bit. And there's probably been many, but if you could narrow it down for us, who's been your biggest inspiration?
Biggest inspiration? Wow, that's a good question. My mother, I mentioned my mother before. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's hard not to be motivated by my mother. My father-in-law, he was just an amazing guy. Susan's dad. I mean, here's a World War II vet who's lost body parts in his career as a contractor, who just was he was a he was the other generation, right? The good generation, whatever they called him. Just to try quietly see, you'd be in a room with him, he never talked to you, but you'd love the guy. So he was a huge influence on me, my father-in-law. Some of these mentors, I don't want to mention their names, local people. Yeah. Those have all been inspirational.
So there's been many.
Oh yeah.
Was there any common traits that you saw with those people, or that you happen to seek out, or maybe in hindsight, there's some commonality with the top 3 traits, or maybe values?
Yeah, even. Yeah. I mean, I think, they're givers. They're givers. They're passionate. I mean, I think you have to believe in what and they're confident. I don't know how you can get ahead in life unless you believe in yourself, right? So you have to believe and be passionate, and and know your strengths and weaknesses. Constantly evaluate yourself. I mean, I knew early on there were, again, smarter people than me and better athletes than me, but I also knew that I could outwork almost anybody else. Yeah. That I had a high intensity level I could bring to so you had to know what your strengths were, and you meet people who can kind of complement those strengths and bring those out of you. Yeah.
So as you say, you're growing, and some of these people helped you grow. and you want to be someone different 2-3 years from now.
Right.
Let's shift a little bit to vision. How does vision play a factor for you? How long or how far in the future do you see when you're trying to create a vision?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And let me answer it this way. So a little personal story about our family. So my in-laws were wonderfully successful and left a little money for each of our kids. And so this is when Willie was a senior in high school or so. My father-in-law died and this money came to the kids. I said, so here's our financial plan. And you kind of see it as it's evolved. We paid for Ellie's college, but she's got to pay for grad school. When you get done with grad school, we'll help you, we'll take you on a trip somewhere and we'll help you buy a home. We'll give you a down payment for a home. But you know, the other thing you can't afford in the next 20 years of your life is to travel. And we've traveled all over the United States and we now want to travel internationally. So why don't you save this money from grandma and grandpa? Why don't you save this money? And we'll invest it and you pick a destination, right? Go to every couple of years. So think about it, right? Think about whether you want to do that. So they said yes to that. That is one of the best things that's ever happened in our life and in our family. So every 2 years, we go somewhere for 8 to 10 days with our children. And it started out with just the 3 kids. Then there was Stephen. Then there was Dan. Now there's Claire.
Yeah.
And so we're planning a trip for the fall of 2020. We're going to.
And these accounts are still utilized for the trips.
I have more money.
So it's not just you guys paying for it.
No, we don't pay for it. They pay for it. It's their money that I've managed for the last 15 years. I have more money than I was given. And next fall we're going to Western Europe on a Rhine River trip. Last year went to Nicaragua on a resort in Nicaragua. 2 years before that we went to Cuba. 2 years before that, we went to Belize. 2 years before that, I can't remember the order anymore. Ireland, Northern Europe, the Danube River, to Egypt. We've been all over the world with our children. And talk about legacy.
Yeah.
And here's the thing. I have people all over the political spectrum in our family, from very liberal to very conservative and everything in between. And we all get along because we travel together and we have fun together. You know, it's a wonderful thing.
Well, and you have face-to-face conversations versus postings on social media.
Yeah,
so
yes, exactly. Face-to-face. So to answer your question, when we first started doing this, Susan looked at me and said, time out. Why are we going to Egypt? I said, we got to sit down for a minute. I said, my dad died at 59. And by that time, my mother had died. My mom was 77. Now, my mom died early because she drank, the drinking didn't kill her. It was smoking. She smoked herself to death. But Susan's parents both lived into their 90s and they were still living. So I said, dear, what do you think of your life expectancy? You're going to live to 90. And your grandparents lived to 90. My dad, I said, I don't think that way. I think I got to live every day. Talk about time here. I got to live every day as if it's the most important day of my life because I don't know how many more days I'm going to have. Yeah. I said, so I'm going to live it.
And even though you're healthy right now.
You don't know, right? So my perception is right now we're doing very vigorous thing. We're going to Patagonia to hike for 2 weeks in January. Last year I went to South Africa for 2 weeks. The year before I went to New Zealand hiking for 2 weeks. We're going to bike in Italy in the fall. So I'm doing all these active things while I'm still. So my vision is I want to keep being active physically as long as I can and travel and learn. And there's going to come someday when I'm probably not able to do that. So I'll do the easier travel, the European stuff. Susan, Europe's great. I said, dear, but you can go there when you're 80.
Lay on a beach when you're 80.
Yeah, 80. I'm not going to lay on a beach.
Yeah.
Last weekend we went to Manawak and hiked. We biked 30 miles a day for 2 days. I want to be active, right?
Well, I want to say kudos to you and your vision with the kids, and then also kudos to the kids you raised for the mature decision in their teens to have the foresight to allow you to manage that money and create these experiences. Yeah. I don't know how many teenagers would be like, yeah, Dad, save the money versus I want a new car or something like that. So
well, thank you for that. As I say, you got to first deal with yourself. Then it's your spouse, right? You work with each other, and then it's your kids, and then it goes from there, right? And I'm a lucky guy. When I ran into Jordan earlier, I said, how's it going? I said, if I'm complaining, something really wrong here, because things are good, and I feel, but some of it's, what the luck part is? Health. I can't predict what my health is going to be. Yeah. I can't predict. I can only do the best I can, right, to take care of myself. And so can they. If something goes wrong, like I did with Paul, I'm going to deal with it, right? I'm going to deal with it. No matter what happens, we're going to deal with it. But as long as I have good health, which is the luck part, you got to keep it, right? You got to exercise. You got to keep mentally and physically going. But after that, it's about doing stuff, right? It's about taking control of your life, using every minute, right? Don't accept, this thing about you guys being with your kids. I did that in the prior generation where guys still were supposed to work all the time.
Yeah.
And I said, no. I want to be with my kids, coach sports and do this stuff.
Yeah, so speaking of coaching, here's a question from one of your former players, Chris Anicetti.
Yeah.
So what made you go the extra mile with believing in people and inspiring people?
Well, as I think I said a little earlier, it came to me early on and quite genetically. I was born, and then 2 or 3 years later, my brother Paul gets born, and I said, wow, I'm a lucky guy. I got to help out. And I ended up having to help my siblings out. I mean, my sisters were in grade school when my dad died, young. And Mom said, can you help them? And then
And they were how many years older than you?
My sisters are 7 and 9 years younger. I'm the oldest. I'm 9 years older than my youngest sibling.
Okay.
And so
I was thinking about your half-sisters, I think.
Oh, my half-sisters are like 15 years older.
Okay.
I didn't really know them well. This was kind of this mystery thing.
Yeah.
And my uncle came back from World War II and the Korean War. He said this was his adopted son, Chuck. I don't believe that anymore.
Yeah.
He was half Japanese. I now know that he was probably not an adopted child, right? I mean, when I grew up, people didn't tell you the truth about all this stuff, right? They didn't tell you the truth. And that's not a good thing.
Yeah. Sorry, I distracted you. Back to the question of believing in people, inspiring people.
Well, I think I was born that way. But here's the thing, you got to then realize it and use it. That's what I'm trying to say to you. I don't think it was magic. I wasn't born a cynic like my brother Patrick. I was born kind of like my brother Paul, kind of positive, and so got to use it. So, but when you have positive experiences, right, it just keeps it going. We talk about success, positive experiences. Not everyone has a positive experience, but a good example. Willie's in a law firm in Milwaukee. A guy by the name of Grant Cloran Jr. works there. Grant's probably 50. Grant's dad was the high school basketball coach at Green Bay Promontory High School in late 60s, early 70s. He died young of cancer, okay? His son now is a lawyer in Milwaukee, okay? Grant is looking through his mother's stuff when his mother dies just a couple years ago and comes across what was called a program for a high school basketball tournament in 1969. Well, it was a piece of paper, right? From the Regional Catholic Basketball Tournament in Green Bay. There are 8 teams in it. I'm on the Marinette Catholic Central team with my buddy Mark Burrish. The Green Bay Promontory team has my buddy Jay Everard, who's one of my close friends, who's here at US Bank. And on the Abbott Penning's team is a guy by the name of Jim Martin. I mentioned his name earlier. Guess what? We played high school basketball together against each other in 1969, and we were law school roommates in 1975. I mean, I'm serious. And
by chance, not by choice.
By total, no. Mark was my good friend, and Jay was my good friend. Jimmy, it just worked out. Now, 50 years later, we're still good friends. How's that for how it works? And so you connect the dots. Jobs talked about in his speech at Stanford about connecting dots. I mean, that's 50 years later. So Grant Cloran pulls this out and says to Willie, he says, your dad's name is on here. And Willie says, not only my dad's name, but his 3 roommates from law school. Grant says, you're kidding. So I'm at the concert on the square last night, US Bank thing, and Tim LeBron, I don't know if you know Tim. Tim's a really motivated guy your age. You should get to know Tim. Tim went to Green Bay Promontory. Was a good friend of Grant Cloran. Again, connecting. Hey, Tim, I didn't know you know Grant.
It's such a small world.
It's a small world. And he works with my son. So, all those things kind of play out. And if you're paying attention. If you're paying attention and you care, but those are things I just do. I don't, but I've taken advantage of it because I know I'm like that.
Well, so you paid attention to the talents you had, is right. what I heard there.
Yeah.
But also you cared enough to want to.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that's the second step. Some people may have these talents versus some people being more cynical. Right. But you also have to want to get outside of yourself and really give and bleed into others.
Oh, absolutely. So. I think by current definitions, I have attention deficit disorder. I couldn't sit down for exams for 2 or 3 hours. It was too hard to do.
You know what? I actually observed that about you. Watching both my younger brother and your son play football, I don't think you ever sat down.
I never sat down.
You were pacing along the fence line.
I was pacing all the time.
Every single game I saw you.
I was pacing all the time. I'm a pacer, right? What can I say? Yes, I am.
Well,
that's an accurate characterization.
Usually arms crossed around your hips, but
yeah, I wasn't yelling or screaming. I was just pacing. No. That's who I am. Yeah.
So that's funny you said that because I had that immediate memory coming back and watching you.
Pace. Basketball game, same way. Susan would say, "Can you sit still?" I said, "I can't sit still."
My wife, even in church, my leg shakes up and down. She'll put her hand on it to try to get it to stop, and very often my leg just ends up shaking her arm, so she'll move it. So I have similar stuff there. All right, so last question before I move into a couple exercises. What has been your experience teaching at UW and what the university means to this community? And was that always a goal of yours to give back after you went there, or just how did that evolve?
Yeah, so that was just one of those lucky things, I guess. I mean, I was a student there from 74 to 5, and then went to law school. Then I needed a couple classes to sit for the CPA exam, so I went back and I met a guy by the name of Jim Blakely. Jim became one of my mentors. Jim has now passed away. His son, a few years younger than me, is a friend and client to this day. Met Jim, and then Jim in 1980, a couple other people came to me and said, "We need a tax class taught every year. Would you teach it every semester?" I said, "Sure." So they asked me to teach in 1980. I taught one class a semester. And then the guy teaching a business law class, his name was Bob Hazy. Bob Hazy, he's now passed away. Bob was my high school American Legion baseball coach. He's from Marinette. So Bob is teaching business law in the business school, not the law school. And Bob was my coach and so on and so forth, baseball coach. He got hired by Tommy Thompson to be the state insurance commissioner. So they said to me, "Would you like to teach the business law class?" I said, "Sure." And the reason I did is I like being with young people. I like being with young people. 21-year-old, 20, 21, 22 are just wonder. But again, people wanting to learn. You want to be with people wanting to learn, and they want to learn. So now, I mean, they're younger than my children, right? I started out, had no kids. And now I have grandkids. It's been a wonderful experience. I've met a terrific number of wonderful people. I feel like I can help them and they can help me, kind of thing. So,
so it's really fascinating to me, as I said before, that your passion, you can tell, is all around, but outside of the legacy thing, you're a lawyer, but your passion's all around business.
Oh, yeah. I always say I'm a business person who's a lawyer. Yeah. That's who I am. The law was I had no capital. I had no money, see? So you can't buy a business when you have no money. So you can be a lawyer and then you can get to be a partner in a firm without very little money. So it was a natural for me. And I figured, I won't do anything I don't like or can't get passionate about, because then you feel like you're prostituting yourself. You're not really believing what you're doing. You got to believe what you're doing.
Yeah. When you believe, you are believed.
Yeah, that's right. And I believe in what I'm doing. So when I realized that, this is where I'm going to go with it. But I'm a business person who's a lawyer. So
part of that question I glossed over was I wanted to ask again, what do you think the impact of UW is on this community?
Oh, it's unbelievable, right? I mean, it's just unbelievable. I think this. I have a brother-in-law whose son now works for us, actually, who always says, and I don't know if this is actually a true story, but he says it to me all the time. Green Bay had a choice in the 1800s to pick a prison or a university, and we picked the prison in Green Bay. That's where he lives. And you have the university. I said, yep. And that's a huge difference, because back to education. Education, you bring smart people to bear in a community. If you can keep them interested and active, you're going to have a successful place, right?
Yeah.
So that's what this place is. I mean, when I came here in 74, it was all about government and university. In the last 45 years, wow, has it changed.
Yeah.
When you add in the epics and the promegas and now the exact sciences and all the other stuff, those are private businesses, right? Yep. The amount of private businesses, I've been working with entrepreneurs for 35 years. And when I used to go to the meetings, there were 10 people there. Now it's unbelievably different. It's a wonderful thing. Just a wonderful thing. Just a quick story. I was on the city's Economic Development Commission for 5 years and chair for 3. And one of the things we had a little piece of, but I'm proud of this piece, is we created a land bank system for the city of Madison. You know what properties we wanted them to buy? All those properties on East Washington Avenue that used to be owned by Don Miller and Gobin and all those. You know why? Mm-hmm. Because they were contaminated environmentally. We said, we need to have the city buy them,
clean them up,
so the city can clean them up and turn them over. And now I go down East Washington Avenue, you know what I see? Building after building of young people and old people like me who want to live downtown. It's just unbelievably different. Yeah. This is a vibrant community, and it's because all of us are pitching in, right? All of us are pitching in.
Yeah. So what do you think, because this is something that I don't necessarily hear in the business school as much, and I wish it was more of a focus of theirs, is and you have a huge amount of influence and have in the startup community of retaining our talent here in town versus them being. So here's an article that really pissed me off, and I don't know that it should as much, but maybe it's because of the industry I'm in.
Yeah.
UW Business School is bragging about their pipeline to Goldman Sachs in New York City.
Well,
I was like, those are people that I could hire right here in the local community, and I'm one of the business owners supporting you. So I think there's two sides of the coin, right? As us as business owners continuing to support the university, but also the university giving back to us.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. I think that's a valid point. Most of my students, most of my accounting majors want to work for the big four accounting firms. And when they come to me and say what they should do, I say, go for it if you want, but I think it's a mistake. Why is that? I said, you have accounting firms in this town that are just as good as them, and you're not going to be fighting the bureaucracy and the yada, yada, yada that you're going to in those firms. But there is a certain attraction, no matter how you cut it, to when you're, let me just put it this way. You play football at Whitewater, right?
Yeah.
Had you been and continue to play, I think, but you quit at some point?
Yeah, 2 years
But
ago.
let me just say, you're Jake Kummerow. You know who he is now,
Yep.
right? Jake's playing for
I
the
don't have
Packers.
as pretty a hair.
Yeah. Yours hair isn't as pretty as his?
Oh, he's got flowing locks.
I haven't paid close attention. I guess it hangs out the helmet.
It does, yeah.
Well, here's what I'm getting at. If you had been him at Whitewater, wouldn't you have sought the NFL? Would you have sought the NFL?
Yeah, it's a dream.
Right?
Yeah.
So if you're a top-level accounting student or a finance professional at UW Business School, do you go for the big time? I think the lure is big.
Yeah, the lure is definitely
The
big.
lure. Now, do I think that's the right decision for many of them? No. But they don't know any better.
Yeah.
They're an undrafted free agent at Goldman Sachs. They're an undrafted free agent with Price Waterhouse,
Or
right?
KPMG or whatever.
Right? I'm just saying, you would have done it.
Yeah.
So in defense of the UW, I'd say that's part of the issue, right? Now, when you attract that kind of talent, we have 14 or 15 CEOs of major companies, more than anybody in the country. That's a talent we're getting. So the lure to go big time is high.
And that's always going to be there.
It's
Sure.
always going to
Yeah.
be there. So my hope is that they realize that when they get to be 30-something and they're going to have a family that living in New York City or Chicago, right?
Isn't ideal.
Well, look, I'll give you a quick story. 2012, Willie's in law school. In the fall, Obama's going to speak on the Baskin Wall, okay? I have tickets for it. And I'm teaching at the business school. I say, Willie, take my tickets, I can't go. He says, Dad, I got to study. I said, Willie, you're an idiot. I said, he's going to be here once. This is a chance in a lifetime for you. You should.
Yeah,
go.
when's the last time?
When's the last time you're going to hear a
Madison?
president speak
Yeah.
there? You should do this. The law school's closed down. You ought to do it. So I'm literally driving into Granger Hall at 1:30, 1:35. My class is at 2:30. He's out on the west side in our office out here. Out this way. Dad, I've changed my mind. I want to go. I turn around. I go get him. I come back. He goes to hear the speech, and I teach. So at the end of the day? Oh, it was great. I'm glad. So what's my takeaway, Willie? I'm glad you heard Obama talk. I said, but could you have done that in Chicago? Could you have done that in New York? What do you mean, Dad? I said, what do you mean? I turned around and took 10 minutes to go get you and brought you back. In Chicago, it's a full day experience.
Yeah.
It wastes the whole day.
At least a half a day.
Yeah, at least a half a day. I said, here, it took 2 hours. I said, I can do things in my life here that I draft laws. I do all this stuff. I said, I couldn't do it in New York and Chicago because the logistics, the transportation, waste of time is enormous. So that's the place, see? If they really think about that, as they mature, they'll say, my daughter, she overpaid for a house in Arlington, Virginia. You know why? It's 10 minutes from work.
Yep.
She was living in Silver Spring, Maryland, hour each way. It was a total waste of time. So our pitch here is, wouldn't you want to live in a community with the logistical size that you can see a president?
Yeah.
You can go to the Overture Center. You can see Wisconsin football. You can drive to Milwaukee to see the Bucks. You can, you do all this stuff in an easier way. See, you can go to Milwaukee and see the Bucks play as quick as you can get from Silver Spring, Maryland to downtown DC. This is just nuts, right? That's true, isn't it?
It is.
So that's the pitch, see?
Yeah.
But you don't get that when you're 22, do you? Time is, you got so much time. You know what? The 22-year-old thinks they're busy. They're not busy. They have nothing to do. But they think they're busy, right? You thought you were busy, didn't you, Chad?
Yeah.
And now, when you get to be 30, 32, you got a career, you got a family. Now you're busy.
Yeah.
You're not busy at 22. So they have no problem. I can drive an hour either way.
Their perspective is that's the busiest they've been in their life, but they don't know.
They don't know. They don't know what they don't know, right?
Exactly.
Their parents tell them they don't listen to their parents. So I think that's part of it. Now, I'm not defending UW. I do think there may be more emphasis on that than there should be, but there's also that pull that you can't. My kids don't want to live in Madison. They think Madison's too small. I'm going, you're crazy for the reasons I just told you. But, what can I say?
Yeah, and maybe they'll discover it, or maybe they'll create a life there, and
If they do, they do. You can only offer them the option. You can't make them do it. Lead a horse to water. I use that phrase. Lead a horse to water.
Can't make them drink.
Can't make them
That's
drink.
right. All right, so let's wrap up. This has been an awesome conversation. We could probably do it for another hour, but I want to play a word association game with you. So
Sure.
your task is to only repeat one word, max of 3.
Okay.
Okay? So I'm going to say a word, and first word that comes to mind, all right?
Okay.
Mentorship.
Friendship.
Regret.
The death of my father, how I handled it.
Okay. Intensity.
Important.
Coaching.
Critical.
Family.
Most important thing there is.
Youth.
Nice to have it.
That's true. Vision.
Tells you what road to go on.
Dream.
Got a dream. Got a hope.
Pride.
Got to have it.
Susan.
Oh, I love her.
Integrity.
Oh, it's a must.
My 2 favorite words now. Inspire.
Essential.
Impact.
I want to have it.
Awesome. Great job.
Oh, okay, thanks.
Did there. All right, so wrapping up, I always ask guests your favorite book of either all-time or most recent read that you think people should know about.
Well, I mentioned the Covey book before. I pick authors and I try to read most of what they do. I love Malcolm Gladwell.
Yeah.
I love
His research is great.
Yeah, but David Marinus is a local guy. I just read his last book called A Good American Family about his dad, Elliot Marinus, and his family. Gladwell, Michael Lewis. I mean, my gosh, I read every Michael Lewis book that comes out. So those are my favorite authors.
Okay, cool. And how, if our listeners want to get in touch with you, how might they do that?
Well, a couple ways. You can always call me, 608-345-5370. Call me on my cell. I always call people back, 608-345-5370, or my email address, jboucher@niterboucher.com.
And they can follow you on LinkedIn as well,
Right. Oh,
as
yeah.
you said.
Yeah.
Well, great. I really appreciate you taking the time today, Joe. This has been a lot of fun.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Stories, conversation was awesome. I know the audience is going to get a lot out of it. So for our listeners, if you enjoyed today's podcast, found it valuable, please leave a review and share with your friends. Again, we're trying to have as much impact as possible, so I want to share that. And follow us at Josh Kosnick. Chad always puts out previews of the episodes and get your interest in listening to the whole thing. So have a great week, everybody.